Welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, as you can see from the title, I'm doing an in-depth tutorial on how to do a fill with polygel with some Nightmare Before Christmas inspired Valentine's Day nails. I've had this polygel set on for about a month, so I'm definitely in need of a refresh. And if you wanted to see how I did this set that I currently have on, the golden brown polygel nails, check out the video posted before this one. As you can see from the text flashing on the screen, we are getting ready to remove this current design, and those are all the tools I'm using. So I'm starting off with a coarse drill bit and my Melody Susie e-file. And as I mentioned, we are doing both hands, so I figured I'd start with my non-dominant hand, get the hard part out of the way. So I'm using my left hand here, and I've got the e-file at a lower speed just because I want to make sure I have more control over the drill, I don't accidentally cut myself. So I would definitely recommend bringing down the speed when you are using your non-dominant hand, and it is going to take a little bit longer to file off, but that's okay. And so a fill is basically where you don't remove your entire set, you are going to fill in the area that's grown out with new product. We're gonna do a refresh in terms of prep and everything, and we're gonna add a new nail design. So that's why the first step is always going to be removing your current design. And you are going to see me take off more product than I normally would because I am going to change out the base color. And if I wasn't changing out the base color, I wouldn't thin out the existing structure too much, but that's just something to keep in mind. So I'm showing in this clip here how I've thinned out the current set a little bit more than I normally would. But as I mentioned, for just a regular fill in general, you don't want to remove the entire structure of the nail completely. The goal is really just to remove the design, remove any lifting, fill in with new product, reshape as needed, and then add your new design. And I'm just showing here how I'm trying my very best to keep my nail bit parallel to the nail plate and not tilt it or angle it too much. That can damage the nail in certain areas, and then also it can just like create dents and stuff, which we don't want. And now that we've removed the design, we are starting off with our nail prep. So we're just taking a cuticle pusher. I'm pushing back the cuticle gently. So the prep for a fill is going to be pretty much the same as a normal set, except you want to remove any lifting if you have any. You're likely going to see that in the areas close to the cuticle. And with time and practice, it should be pretty minimal, hopefully. And you just want to make sure you use something like a medium bit or even like a sanding band. Just make sure those areas are removed. You just want to be careful that you're not filing onto like the natural nail too much, which is why I would say to use something that's a little bit less coarse. So I'll show you what I use. What I like to do is just finish off pushing back the cuticle. I also like to use a micro taper bit to further clean up that area. And then I like to use a very fine grit sanding band, like a 240 grit sanding band. This is just gonna prep the area that's grown out, and then if there is any lifting, I can go ahead and remove that and just make sure that area is nice and flush. Now, when I was a beginner, I would have a lot of areas that were lifted up, a lot that would have to be removed. And honestly, sometimes if it's gotten to a point that is really extensive, it's just better to like redo the entire nail if it's really like compromised the structure of the nail a lot, of the nail extension. So just kind of be mindful of that. Now we're moving on to the other hand. So now I'm using my right hand. So this is like my dominant hand. So this hand is looking a lot better and not as in rough of shape as the other hand. But one thing I'm really trying to do this year is make sure that I'm showing both hands in like one video, and not just for you guys, but also for me. I really miss just having like my nails done with both hands done completely with the same design. For some reason, you know, when you are like a nail tech, a nail artist, a content creator, a brand owner, it is often, you know, a lot of stuff is like content driven. So we tend to like not repeat the same design on the other hand, or we often don't have time to do it. Just kind of going back to like why I started this all in the first place is I love doing my nails. I love having my nails done. So that's just something that I'm really trying to make sure I do this year. And of course, filming all of it. So that means like longer videos, more in depth. Might take a little bit longer to film and edit, but I think it's worth it. So we're just repeating the same steps here once we've removed the current design. We're taking our cuticle pusher and we're starting our nail prep. And I'm trying out a little bit of a technique today that I've seen online, which is using baby powder, using it kind of on a dry brush. I'm sure there's a less messy way to do this, but what this does is it absorbs any oils. So if you're somebody that likes to use an e-file to nail prep, do like dry manicures, this is going to help absorb the oils, as I said. And I think it really just helps show very visibly the areas that need to be cleaned up. And I think it gives you a little bit of a cleaner finish. I really liked it. I feel like I definitely had an easier time doing my prep. So I would recommend it. And especially if you have clients with like oily nail beds, and stuff like that, I think it can really help out with that as well. The last step we're doing here in terms of our e-file is again using that 240 grit sanding band in the area that's grown out, removing any lifting, making sure that area is nice and flush. And then you can also use it to kind of buff out the surface of the nail, just because it might be a little bit rough from that coarse bit, just so you have a smoother finish and a little bit more of a cohesive, nicer finish before we apply any product. And it is normal for your nails to kind of, you know, maybe be a little bit wonky or lose their shape after all this filing, so you can just reshape before we do the rest of our prep, and of course we'll reshape after application. Now I've used Young Nail Swipe to dehydrate and cleanse, again remove any oils, remove any dust, and now I'm applying my primer, which is Young Nails Protein Bond, in the area that's grown out. If a little bit gets on the actual nail extension, that's okay. After that's air dried, I'm applying my gel base coat. I'm applying it to the entire nail only because I am doing a new base color. If I wasn't doing a new base color, I would not apply it to the entire nail. You would just apply it wherever you plan to apply polygel. And I am using our new rubber base coming very soon with our next launch with new polygel colors. And here's the color I'm using for my polygel application today. This is our Desert Rose Polygel. This is from my brand. If you didn't know, I do have my own nail brand with polygels, gel polishes, art gels, brushes. So those clips you saw in the beginning are products from my brand. You can shop at doperthanyournails.com, use code YouTube to save. Everything is in the description. I'm getting my slip solution ready, which is 70% isopropyl alcohol, and my polygel brush. This is also from my brand. This is our hybrid gel brush. This is a bigger brush than what you typically see with like polygel kits, so it makes application easier. And this is like my personal brush that I use for polygel sets that I use and have stored for, like, you know, my own personal products that I use. So I've done 2 nails here, and we're gonna go ahead and do at least like one with the non-dominant hand here on camera. So I'm applying the polygel directly to the nail, and I do recommend storing your polygel upright like that. It does prevent like air bubbles and it's just less messy. So I'm using my non-dominant hand here, but the process is pretty much the same. You're just gonna start pressing into the polygel, gently patting and dragging, using the edges of your brush to tuck into the cuticle area the best that you can. And once the polygel is kind of to your liking, you can start dragging the rest down. It's important to use a light hand, and I'm also making sure I don't have too much liquid on my brush. You can always swipe backwards as needed to apply the polygel as well, smooth out any areas. But because I'm using my left hand here, I'm not expecting a perfect application, but I'm just trying my best to get it as smooth as I can, but we'll clean anything up that we need to during shaping. There's no magic trick when it comes to using your opposite hand. You really just need to build up the muscles in those hands, get them used to doing those techniques, and the more you practice, the easier it will become. And to use a smaller dappen dish like me, I do recommend cleaning out your liquid and your brush, you know, as needed, just because you don't want to be using slip solution that has a bunch of polygel residue in it. You know, just like when it starts getting super cloudy, really messy, I would definitely just swap it out. And we're just going on to the next nail here. I really love this color. This is my personal favorite from my brand. This is Desert Rose. It's really like a dusty, kind of basically dusty rose color. I think it's really a really nice base, and you know, it's a little bit more pigment and color than some of our other colors like Wispy Peach. It gives you a little bit more pop of color, but I still think it looks really natural. So as I mentioned before, with the fill, if I was using the same color as before, Wispy Peach, I wouldn't need to necessarily bring it all the way down or apply as much. But this is why we thinned out the base a little bit more than usual, because we're covering it with a new color. So if we left the entire base there as is, the nail would have just turned out way more bulky, and we would have had to like reshape a lot more than we need to. And another hack for always, you know, making sure that your other hand is done and practicing with your non-dominant hand is to do it first. You're never going to skip your dominant hand, but you might skip your non-dominant hand. So if you get it done first, you've pretty much guaranteed that you will finish both hands. Now switching over to the other side, I've dehydrated with Young Nails Swipe. I've used our Young Nails Protein Bond as our primer in the area that's grown out, and I'm using our base coat. I seriously love this base coat. I'm really excited to release it. I've taken a long time on a base coat because I wanted to make sure it was just right. And I'm really excited that it's going to be a rubber base, because that means it'll have more functionality beyond just being used beneath nail enhancements. You could do like structured manicures. You could use it to apply like clear gel X tips. So stay tuned for that. But we're just applying this to the entire nail, and it's important that when you cure this in the lamp, you do not remove the sticky layer. because the sticky layer is what's going to help the product stick to the nail. It's kind of the whole purpose of a base coat. So just here again, I'm using our Desert Rose Polygel and our Polygel brush, and I'm applying the polygel directly to the nail. You could also put the polygel on some sort of tool and kind of scoop it out and apply it that way. I go kind of back and forth between the two techniques. And when I'm doing application, I am just using my nail extension and shape here as a guide. I'm trying to make sure the polygel fits to that as nicely as possible, making sure I drag it out to the edges so those spots are covered as well. But it should be thinner at the edges, right? The bulk of your product should be kind of towards the center, and any excess product you want to remove, of course, you can always use that on the next nail, whatever you'd like. But pretty much here, you know, if you wanted to do like a second layer, you could do that as well. If you wanted more of like a natural finish, I would just do one layer, but polygel is very buildable. I think it's always better to apply less and then add more as needed. It's always easier to add more. If you add too much, you're just gonna have to file to remove any excess. So we're just moving on to the next nail here. And as you can see, the first step for me is always just kind of pressing and patting that initial bead down, kind of flattening it as needed before I start kind of tucking it into the cuticle area or bringing it out to the sides. And I've mentioned this a few times, but using a light hand is really important, and just kind of being mindful of the pressure you are applying with your brush and to the polygel. Luckily, this polygel is pretty balanced, so you shouldn't really run into trouble with it, you know, sticking to your brush or stuff like that. But with certain brands and polygels, if you are like stabbing into the product, pressing too hard, it can kind of become a really sticky mess. And regardless, you don't want to remove all of the polygel or move all of it around. The reason we are patting and dragging in place and using the light hand is because we're building the structure of the nail as we go, right? So we're just kind of using that shape as a foundation. So as you can see here, I'm dragging down, but I'm also kind of patting and redefining as needed. And even when I'm dragging down, I'm making sure I'm not removing all of the product, right? I want to make sure I'm filling in those areas and creating a sound structure as I bring the product down. Larger polygel brush helps a ton. If I had a brush like this back when I started, I would have saved so much time. It's just so much easier to apply. It's much faster. It's much easier to smooth out the product and get into those cuticle areas as well for a nicer finish. After you cure your polygel, you'll remove the sticky layer with a lint-free wipe with some alcohol on it, and we can move on to shaping. I'm starting off with a 5-in-1 bit. This is a fine grit bit, and I am using this along the cuticle area, again using it as parallel as I can, not like angling it in too much. I use this bit to clean up the cuticle area. I'd also use it along the surface of the nail just to smooth everything out and to bulk any areas as needed. Personally, for me, I feel like the combination of an e-file and hand file really gives that crispy shape. You also want to go ahead and clean under the nail if there's any excess product under there. The tapered kind of cone shape of this bit really helps a lot. For the cuticle area, I would say it's really important to make sure you're not pressing into the nail too much again. You want to let the drill bit do the work for you, and you don't want to overfile the cuticle area either. We're just refining that area and cleaning it up lightly as needed to make sure it's nice and clean and flush. This is both for aesthetic and structural purposes. We want to make sure that that area doesn't have any product, you know, that's bulky or excess product in the cuticle area that can cause lifting. We also just want to make sure that aesthetically, you know, we have a clean finish in that area as well, so our nail set turns out as nicely looking as possible. And at this point, the fill is very much so complete, so we're just shaping as we normally would for any polygel set, even when like you've done a new set. For the opposite hand, again, I would recommend bringing the speed down and really just making sure that you are being really mindful of the movements and just kind of really slowing down and trying to control your technique as much as possible, just so your drill doesn't skip or accidentally cut you, and use your hands to kind of brace and stay steady as well as you can. And of course, we can't forget hand filing. This is one of my favorite parts. I do feel like the hand file really brings everything together, and it just does certain things that I feel like an e-file is not able to do as well. So I like to use this under the nail to remove any excess product. If you have any product that you weren't able to get out with your drill bit, this really helps. I like to make sure that I am going over the entire surface of the nail as well, just to smooth everything out, remove any uneven areas. And I would say like hand filing for me is definitely the part that's a little bit harder with the non-dominant hand. I just think that, you know, it's the amount of kind of pressure and technique it takes, it's just a little bit more difficult. So what you can do is keep your hand still and move the file instead. And again, just do the best that you can. It will all come together in the end. Now to remove any scratches and just make sure we have that ultra smooth polished finish before nail art, I'm going back in with a 240 grit sanding band. This is one way that you can do it. This is definitely more precise and faster. Another way is using a buffer, and then if you really want that ultra smooth finish, I would recommend cuticle oil on the nail and then buffing. It gives you like an ultra polished finish. You just want to make sure that you wash your hands after, get rid of any oils, and just cleanse thoroughly just so that there's no leftover oil before nail art. Now for the fun part, nail art. So I am using our Celestial Love Valentine's Day collection. This is our art gel collection, and it has like this kind of cosmic, celestial kind of, you know, astrology theme to it. It comes in this really fun box. I really love the design of this. I think it's one of my favorite designs we've done for our collection. This is again available on my website, doperthanyournails.com, and we have a bunch of different Valentine's Day bundles available as well that you can shop, but this is like the actual Valentine's collection. So it comes with 8 art gels. There's a combination of like shimmers, kind of metallic finishes, and then some solid colors, and they're all kind of a range of like reds, you know, glitters, pinks for the Valentine's Day theme. And it also comes with a free art gel brush with the collection because they come in pots and they have like a thicker consistency. This helps pick it up and kind of apply it. This is the swatch card that comes with it, and the packaging for this collection is just super fun. So I'm just gonna let the swatches play of the full collection before we get into the nail art. You can also shop these colors individually if there are like specific colors that you wanted or you needed to restock on some colors. But for this nail set, I am starting off with Lunar Gaze as my base, and as you can see, it has kind of like this thicker, almost fluffy texture for this shade. This color is honestly stunning. It's like this milky white base, and it has like this pink glitter in it that has like almost like a chrome, liquid chrome type finish. Like the shift in it is just honestly so mesmerizing, especially under the sun or flash. And as I mentioned, it has a thicker consistency than our gel polishes. It also has a no wipe finish, so it's great as a base for detailed art, for blending, for shading. You're gonna see me do all of that today. So now I'm going in with our shade Supernova. This is a solid color. It's like a bubblegum pink, and I'm just loading up my brush here, and we're gonna start off with a patchwork design. So I really wanted to do Valentine's Day like meets Nightmare Before Christmas. So I wanted to do like the classic kind of patchwork design that you see, the stitching in Nightmare Before Christmas, but of course with a Valentine's Day twist. So I'm starting off with this pink here and just kind of doing an angle here, almost like a French tip, but we're just kind of going in diagonally until we kind of meet the end of the nail, and then we're gonna overlap with a different color. Now we're gonna use the shade 7th House, which is this really nice kind of classic red. We're gonna go ahead and repeat the design on the other side, and because this is not like an actual French tip, I'm kind of sketching out the design a little bit more lightly before going in and really kind of solidifying it, just so I can see kind of the proportions and where I wanted it to meet. But there's the inspo up on the screen, kind of like the patchwork, but Valentine's Day edition. So once I've kind of got that diagonal line in, I went ahead and filled it in, and I'm just adding the stitching, which is basically these lines across on both sides with the opposite color. So nice and simple for this first nail, and I repeated that on the other hand as well. Next, I'm using the shade Solar Sinistry. I've already applied it to the other hand. This is a really nice gold color, but it's not your typical like gold chrome. It has a really nice rose gold kind of undertone to it, and it's very buildable. I would say if you really wanted the undertones to pop more, to apply one thinner layer. If you really wanted the gold to pop more, you could do 2 layers. But either way, I'm starting with 1 layer here and using this art gel brush, Makes it really easy to polish the nail and just make sure that cuticle area is as nice and neat as possible. So our art gel brush is designed again to pair with our art gels, but you could even use it to apply and polish custom colors you mix on your palette, or use it for builder gel or even polygel if you prefer a smaller brush, or even as a cleanup brush. Are painting Jack Skellington to start, but I've mixed a little bit of Supernova into the white just so it's not a pure white and it has a little bit of a pink undertone to it. So I'm trying to kind of keep within a certain color palette to make it more Valentine's Day themed, as you'll see and I'll explain. But we're just starting off with Jack Skellington here. We are starting off with the top of the head, which is basically a round upside down U shape. And the way that I like to do this is I just kind of slowly sketch and build out the shape and design as I go, just because I'm trying to make sure the proportions make sense as I'm outlining it. So the front of the face almost has like this slant to it, and then the back of the head is even more curved. And then you're just gonna go ahead and fill that in and just make sure there's a little bit of a point for the nose. With any nail art design, it's just about breaking it down piece by piece. For the neck, we wanna make sure it's very skinny, very important for Jack. The jacket has multiple pieces, so I'm starting off with a curved line in black, then outlining, kind of doing the same thing in white here, and then we'll add in the different pieces that you see here. So we're gonna take our black gel polish again, draw the kind of bat piece at the center, which is basically 2 diagonal lines, and kind of make them thicker at the edge. Now I'm kind of drawing these kind of slightly curved, raised kind of spikes, almost bat details on his jacket again. And to make it thicker at the bottom and then thinner, you're just using different pressures with your brush. So I'm pressing harder at the base, and then I'm lifting my brush up at the edge to really get that thinner line. After adding some small white details, I'm using a dotting tool for the eye and drawing a very curved line for the smile, the face, with just some simple stitching. And now for the fun part, which is shading. I'm using red, I'm using our Crimson Wash Jelly. This is from our Art Glass collection. And I was initially going to do like kind of blackish gray, but again, I'm keeping with the Valentine's Day theme. So I'm using some red instead, just to kind of tie the whole look together and give it kind of that Valentine's Day aesthetic. So I'm just concentrating more of that jelly at the edge and then feathering it out as I get closer to like the eyes and the smile. I'm also using it on the jacket. I'm using like the smallest amount on my brush. I feel like the key with shading is to build it up, use less and then build up more. So again, I'm gonna redefine those areas here. If you haven't checked out our Art Glass gels, they are amazing, not just as like jelly colors in general, but for shading and adding dimension that has kind of this more almost like translucent but still kind of shaded look. I think it makes shading really easy, especially as a beginner. So I just went ahead and feathered that out again and then cured, and then we're top coating. I really love how this turned out. I think Jack is actually a really great design to try as a beginner for like character nail art. I think kind of the color palette and dimensions are much easier to break down in terms of, you know, design compared to some other designs that you might see. Now we're painting Zero, Jack's dog, with our opposite hand. So a lot of people always ask like, how do you paint or do art with your opposite hand? And the answer is literally you just kind of go for it. And my goal is to always kind of get the basic outline in there and then I clean it up. So there's a lot of curved lines here with Zero. I'm filling it in very slowly, but you'll see I'm gonna go back and redefine those lines. But my goal, especially with my non-dominant hand, is just to get those basic details in there, and then I will go back and slowly redefine those lines as needed. And you can see my brush is really moving with me, and I'm kind of moving my hand as needed. So I would recommend using a longer liner brush. Again, this is the 12mm. You want that brush to kind of do the movement for you and kind of move in rhythm with you, especially when you're using your opposite hand. And again, with time and practice, you will kind of gain that control. My goal is just to become ambidextrous at this point, because I think that is simply, of course, the easiest way to kind of be able to do this, but you just kind of have to give it your best shot, and it might not turn out as good as your other hand, but you know, with time and practice, you will get better at it. I'm using that Crimson Wash Jelly again to do the little details on his nose. I use 7th House Art Gel for the collar, and then we're adding the same shading details here. So again, this is how I'm kind of keeping the design kind of cohesive, is I'm going to be using that whitish pink mixture for the nail art, for the character nail art, and then I'm using the Crimson Wash as the shading to tie the whole set together So that's just kind of a little bit of a nail design hack if you are somebody that wants your sets to look, you know, kind of cohesive, especially when you're doing kind of more detailed character sets like this. So I think this is a really great way to do that. And honestly, it's kind of unique because you don't really see Jack or Zero kind of painted with the red details, so I feel like it does give it that Valentine's Day look. We're gonna add some final details with some black gel here, and then we can go ahead and cure and top coat, and we are done with this nail. Now we are going to paint Sally, and we're moving back over to the other hand, and I'm going to polish with Solar Sinistry just to match the base that we used for Jack. So for Sally, I'm using the same white gel polish mixture with Supernova Art Gel mixed in, just so it has a little bit of that pink undertone. And for her outline, it's pretty much a similar circular shape. It's not as curved at the back of the head. The nose area is a little bit more pointed, and then the chin area is a lot more curved. And that is pretty much like the basic shape, and I would go ahead and fill it in at that point. So for the chest and kind of neck area, I would draw it as one piece because we will need to add in her dress. I'm drawing this kind of slightly curved line, and then I'm gonna go ahead and just fill it in, going towards the back. I know it looks kind of crazy right now, but this is kind of the easiest way to do it. And if you really wanted like more of an accurate Sally kind of skin tone finish, I would use our gel polish Antique Jade. I was going back and forth, but then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna make the skin tone and the dress and everything kind of stay within the Valentine's theme. We'll make her pretty much like the same skin tone as Jack, but we'll add in the red jelly finish, and then we'll make the dress like pink and black. So that's what I ended up going with ultimately, but Antique Jade is actually a really nice color if you wanted to do more of an accurate Sally. So I'm taking Supernova and I'm basically filling in the outline of her dress and making those kind of pointed, almost torn pieces at the top, where it's kind of like her dress kind of has like these kind of jagged, like ripped pieces. And then for the sleeve, I just made it black with, again, some of those kind of jagged pieces again. And now you can kind of see why I was drawing the outline the way that I did. It's much easier to just draw kind of the neck and chest area and then fill in the dress on top of that. We're adding some kind of swirly designs and just random lines as far as the pattern goes. And then we'll go ahead and draw her hair. I would definitely do her hair last just because it's going to cover part of the dress. So I think this order of operations is what makes most sense and is the most simple. I'm using our art gel in the shade 7th House for her hair, which is probably a little bit more red than the actual movie, but again, we're sticking with the Valentine's theme, and I really wanted Jack and Sally to look very cohesive because we're gonna have the moon detail in the middle, so it's kind of like the 3 nails are kind of an art design in itself. I added a little bit of our Etched Ember jelly polish over it just to add a little bit of orange, and I'm using some black gel polish and just drawing some lines for the strands of her hair. Using our Crimson Wash Jelly again from the Art Glass collection. It's also available individually if you wanted certain gels from that collection, like this one. I'm concentrating the color where her hair is and then using a shorter 5mm brush to feather that out, just ever so slightly, and then making it lighter as we kind of get to the edge of the face. We're basically mirroring what we did with Jack, and you'll kind of see what I mean by cohesive design once you see the middle nail. And I'm actually really happy with how this turned out because I wanted it to be, like I said a million times, more Valentine's Day themed, and I kind of wanted to put my own twist on it, and I feel like these color combos really brought that out. We're just doing the mouth details here, again, just a curved line, and adding some lines on top of that for the stitching on the neck as well. I used some of our art gel, the red art gel for the lips. For the eyes, I'm using like a pure white gel polish so it really pops, and I'm just drawing the outline of her eye, which is kind of like a rounded triangle, filling that in, and then just taking a black gel polish to outline the eyes, which are definitely like the most dramatic part of her. design, I would say, is like the eyelashes and then just making sure like the top of the eyes are really dark. And that's pretty much it for Sally. I just went ahead and cured and top coated, and we are done with this nail. I wasn't sure how Sally was going to look if I made her more similar to Jack in terms of like the color palette and everything, but I think it ended up looking really nice and kind of had its own unique twist. For the middle nail, we are doing the mountain, the kind of hill scene with the moon, but of course Valentine's edition. So I'm using Lunar Gaze as the background shade again, just polishing a layer of that. This is like honestly the perfect background shade for kind of that moon hill scene. And of course, for all of my moon designs, I use our Winter's Veil gel polish. This is like one of my most used colors. It's like a really nice pearlescent white. It's really good for like dimensional pearly designs, and of course for moon nail art. And of course, I'm making the moon in a shape of a heart. So I'm just sketching that out and then filling that in at the center. And then again, the great thing about this gel polish is you could polish it as is, but of course for the pearly effect, you're gonna go ahead and start swirling around the gel with your brush or a dotting tool before you cure. This Winter's Veil gel pretty much does kind of all the work for you when you're doing a moon design. So it really gives that kind of dimensional moon planet design, and it's really great for like just like pearl mermaid nails, things like that. And we're going to create a red glow around the heart moon. So I'm taking the 7th house art gel again, that solid red. I'm outlining the entire heart, kind of making the outline a little bit thicker. I seriously love these art gels for like designs and details like this. I can't wait to put out more colors. And I added some stitching details, of course, and then to add kind of that red glow, I'm using Crimson Wash and layering that over the outline. We're also gonna feather that into like the inside edges of the nail. It's just gonna kind of give it that glowy nighttime effect and just kind of enhance the design, and again tie together the color palette and theme again. So I'm feathering that into the center of the nail and just leaving a little bit of that white pearly gel as is at the center. Here's the inspo. So I'm not really recreating any specific image. I just took inspiration from kind of like the classic design from the movie, some Valentine's inspo on Pinterest, and kind of made it my own. Now for the hill design, I mixed 7th house and Supernova art gels together, and I love the color that came out of this. It's almost like this, not magenta necessarily, but it's just like this kind of really nice pinkish red. So again, when you're kind of like thinking of different colors that you want to create within a certain color theme, you can start mixing some of those colors together. I wanted to use a color I hadn't used yet, but I didn't want to use the same red or pink. So I was like, oh, let me mix them together. That'll be a really nice in-between. Just so that like the color palette is kind of within the same theme, but it has like, again, its own distinct color. So we're basically drawing the curly Q hill, and then I cured that, and now I'm taking some of the 7th house art gel and just lightly feathering it on the edges. So I'm using like the smallest amount of on my brush. So these art gels are also really good for like blending and shading, because you can use just like a very small amount to kind of feather in there and add in some dimension and shading, and it blends really, really nicely, and it kind of gives a different effect in terms of shading versus the like Crimson Wash jelly. But I have like the smallest amount on my brush. I'm not looking to overpower that base color. I'm just looking to work in a little bit of that red around the edges. And once I've cured, I went back in certain areas and added a little bit more. Here's how the heart moon turned out. I really love this. I think it's one of my favorite designs of the whole set. And now you'll see with Jack and Sally on either side, kind of the vision that I had for kind of the 3 nails together. And then for the pinky, I just wanted to do some simple stars. I've been really into the stars lately, like just painting them and adding them to nail art. I know they're super in right now. They're honestly just like a really fun accent to add to any nail. So I added Lunar Gaze for the base, and then I'm using Supernova art gel to draw the stars. And this is what I mean by the art gels, like because of the thicker consistency, I feel like you're gonna get a crisper and more clean design. I mean, not that you can't with gel polish, but I feel like with the art gels, it's just way less runny. Though I've drawn stars with our gel polishes as well. So it's really just a matter of, you know, mixing and matching products and kind of using the different products in different places. But I am using the 7th House art gel, the red, again at the edges, the very smallest amount, just to add like the littlest bit of dimension and shading, again, to just kind of keep the color theme and palette going. So I just like to use a smaller brush to blend everything in. And like I mentioned, I'm using like the smallest amount on my brush. Once that's cured, I'm gonna go ahead and top coat, and then we're gonna repeat on the other hand with our non-dominant hand. Also, a little hack that I kind of figured out in a random way is that you might have noticed that my brushes have a layer of like fabric on them. So these liner brushes, I wrapped a layer of medical tape around them. They're not my brand, the brushes, but I just like to use this length of liner brush for my nail art most of the time these days. But the handle was like a little bit uncomfortable to hold for like longer painting sessions, and so I wrapped medical tape to just kind of create a little bit of a barrier. And I realized it actually creates kind of a really nice surface for you to kind of hold your brushes. Like, I think it gives you a little bit more control, it gives you a little bit better grip. So you might want to try that out. It's just wrapping a layer of medical tape around your brushes. I definitely feel like it gave me better control, and it was just a lot more comfortable to hold for longer periods of time. And then I looked it up online, and then I saw that like a lot of artists that paint on like canvases and stuff do that, you know, especially when you're like painting for long sessions at a time, your hands kind of start to hurt. So maybe try it out. I think it also just helps stabilize things. But moving on to the last two nails here, we are gonna go ahead and paint just kind of some random Valentine's elements. So for the middle nail, I'm creating like this kind of stripe design. I'm using the Winter's Veil gel polish, again, the one that we use for the moon, but like a very thin layer of it. And again, with the opposite hand, you can see that the easiest thing to do is sometimes keep the brush as steady as possible and move your hand to kind of help it maneuver and get those lines as straight as you can. So I just drew some simple lines, and then I added some red gel over it, and then I'm gonna add some stitching details. I didn't really want to add more character nail art at this point, not necessarily because I didn't want to draw it with my opposite hand, but just because I kind of wanted to balance out the set a bit. So I'm adding just some kind of fun elements and designs here that feel Nightmare Before Christmas themed, but with some Valentine's twist. So we got like the stripes here with a little bit of red, but the stitching. And then of course I had to add a bow. I'm using that same kind of pinkish white mixture with Supernova. And my technique here, as I mentioned before, is literally just getting the lines in there and then redefining and cleaning them up as I go. So I just went ahead and cured, and then I'm adding just the smallest amount of red. This is that red jelly, again, Crimson Wash. So I'm just adding like the smallest amount of that, just so, again, it's kind of within the same color palette. And we're gonna go ahead and top coat, and that is the final nail. So here's the full set together, both hands. This is definitely one of my favorite sets I've done for Valentine's Day recently. Let me know what you think of it in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. You can shop all the products that I used through my website in the description, and I will see you in my next video.